Good morning. We're in the middle of the Maimer of the Mittler Rebbe. Biy'a Hashem Elokeinu. Biy'a L'Sheves. We're on page 376. At the end of the paragraph, 376. This is the basis of Hemshech Chaim Beis that we're learning, especially the last 11 pages, and more specifically, pages 1467 and 68 is what parallels what we've been learning here in the Mittler Rebbe. Namely, that in the process of refining the animal soul to turn from oil, which is the wisdom of the animal soul, driven and focused on its own needs, to an oil that is drawn and feeds the psila, the wick of the divine soul, which in turn creates v'haftas Hashem lekecha, the flame, the fire, the passion of loving God. So this process requires work, avodah, and the avodah is hatfilah, namely that after Psukkah de Zimra and Birchas Yetzer and Birchas Avos Elam comes Shema, which is about the yichud, the Shema, the Havana and understanding and internalizing of the yichud elyon, the divine unity, which in other words really is the divine reality, the exclusivity of divine reality that is the only true reality, that even the animal souls can also be taken and impacted by that to the point that it comes to learn to love God. That's where we're headed. So we're in the middle of that contemplation, and namely the discussion around that yichud, starting with the process of how God's relationship with existence in a form of yesh ma'ayin, not yesh miyesh, which means that it's nothing commensurate between the two, nothing in common. Yesh miyesh, there's something in common. And the second thing is that the yesh that produces another yesh is affected by that production, whereas creation does not have an impact. And no shinu nispilus in elokus, in the creation. And that's why it's compared to Oir, because Oir does not impact the Moir, the source. Furthermore, Oir itself is not impacted by the place it's shining to, like we see with sunlight. The sun is not affected by the Oir, and the Oir is not affected by the fact, let's say it's a cloudy day, the light is concealed or not concealed, the light shines. Shefa is the place where there is a relationship and there's an impact from the mashpia and the mushpa, the shefa, the flow, and that there's something in common between them. So that is the contemplation. To take it further, the Mittler Rebbe brings the mashal of the sun, but also the mashal of the Eir HaNeshama, the Eir HaNefesh. The nefesh too is an entity, it's a force, source of life, source of energy. It gives off an energy, Eir HaNefesh, and the Eir HaNefesh is not impact the nefesh itself, and to the point that the events that happen with the nefesh, the Eir HaNefesh that enters the body, is not affect the nefesh itself. To use the language that we learned inside, in the parenthesis, like sunlight. And in other words, the soul does not change based on how much energy it's exuding or it's transmitting to give life, which, of course, is the mashal for Ani Hashem Leisha Nisi, that God, that creation is in that same way. However, one second. Okay. וגם בכרך הנפש ברוסם בגילי, שיכול בזה, אין שני כלל בזה. The im kol zeh, says the Mittler Rebbe. On the other hand, we do find the concept that the nefesh feels the experience of the body. So which seems to contradict what we just said. So when there's an injury, the kilkul be'evri aguf, we feel pain. Who feels pain? The body itself doesn't have any sensations without a nefesh. It means something the nefesh is feeling the pain. Because as I said, God forbid, a corpse doesn't feel pain. The taragish nefesh became yitzar nefesh. Hagam shemushlalas mukol teirei aguf. Even though we just said the nefesh defies and is not connected, it defies any form of teirei haguf, physical descriptions. Ve'ein beishinei klal, like we said. Or Muchach Lemer, says the Mittler Rebbe, that both things are true. And how does he reconcile it? That there's two levels in the nefesh. There's the Eir HaNefesh as it manifests inside the body through the Dam Hu HaNefesh, what he calls the Ruchni Shebegashmis. And then there's the nefesh as it is removed from that. And that nefesh has the Gashmi Sheberuchnius, which is the beginning of the process of the soul coming into the body. But that's removed. So therefore, the effect that the pain and the joy of the body has on the soul is in the lower level of the soul. The higher levels are not impacted. That's the brief answer of it. Yeah. So therefore, that's where the tzaraneni. And the tzaraneni go both ways. The pain, the body's pain and joy affects that lower level of the soul, and the vice versa. Something that excites, something that brings pleasure or pain to the soul will also affect the body. Like you said, the good news made his leg swell. Tadash made the bone swell. And the same thing, the opposite. When a person has bad news, it causes things to shrink, as he explained. So bottom line is you see that relationship, but that relationship is only in the nefesh that's malubish and manifests in the body, not mechayis etzema nefesh, bilti melubeshes klal beguf. Except leprokim, where you have halev yedei modas nafshe, that the heart feels the bitterness of the soul. Like he said, there's sometimes an effect, but in general, that's not the case. And then he concludes, which brings it back to our topic, ach beispelis enig v'tzar belikus b'neshama. So the same as when the neshama, the nefesh alikis, feels pleasure or pain, also the animal soul is affected by that. That's why you can have the situation where the divine soul can in fact v'haftas Hashem alikecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, that the heart, also the left side of the heart, can feel the love of God. That's the nefesh alikis melubeshes mamish b'nefesh habamis, like we said earlier. Nefesh alikis, its very faculties manifest within the faculties of the animal soul. The point that you could explain to the animal soul, the seichel of the nefesh alikis can explain to the intelligence of the nefesh habamis. It could also affect its emotions and its behavior, like we learned in the previous page 374 and 375. And that concludes the summary of what we learned yesterday. He's now going to bring it back, obviously, Lamaila to Hashem, because till now it's all been the moshel, whether it's the moshel of the sunlight or the moshel of the nefesh. Now he's going to come back to explain how it is above in Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the relationship of God, the Creator, God, with existence. That there too is going to be two levels that he just described. Now, if you go to Ayin Beis, pages 1467, namely 1468, I should say, and 1469, you'll see there's actual direct quotes there from this piece that we just learned. And I want to correct something that I said yesterday. I said that the Rebbe Marashab does not go back to Nefesh Habamis. That's incorrect. He also brings a whole piece about the Nefesh Habamis, the Nefesh Alikis relationship with the Nefesh Habamis in this context on page 1469. Just wanted to make that clear, where he talks about how that the Madrega Tachtena Shebeneshama is affected by the animal soul. That's why Nefesh Kisechta, that's why a sin can affect it. But the way the Neshama is in the higher level, there it's beyond Chet. Explain that. And then he said, to affect the Nefesh Habamis Abir Tikkun, Like we learned here, he said that requires the neshama to come down below and do it in a form of mamatla maila. The neshamas come and interact with the body, and therefore it has the ability to transform the animal soul. But there's a lot more details around that, which I don't want to go into right now, but I just wanted to point out that it very much complements what we just learned. And we will go back to the Ayin Beis. I just right now wanted to just parallel the two. But he also brings there a lot about the Gashmi Shabaruchnius and Ruchni Shabagashmius, where there is an impact of the body's experiences on the soul, and the levels that there is no impact. And then on the bottom of 1469, he goes back Vadugma calls there, which is follows again the Mittler Rebbe's Maamorei that we're going to learn now, continue learning at the bottom of page 376. So essentially 376 now corresponds more or less with pages 1468 and 1469 in Ayin Beis, in case you want to see the parallels. Okay, ready to continue? Unless somebody wants to ask anything, ready to continue? And how he's going to explain how it is Lamaila. At the end of the day, this is a contemplation in Shema, in coming to understand how existence relates to the creation relates to the Creator. So the new paragraph on page 376, the bottom, the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. We continue learning the Mittler Rebbe's Maamorei. V'kach yuven l'mayla b'neshama haklolis. So just as we just explained the neshama apratis, the soul and body of every human being, that there's a place where the soul interacts with the body, and they affect each other, and there's a place where the neshama is beyond that. So the soul is true in the neshama haklolis, which means the general soul that gives life to existence. It's also a soul. Matter of fact, the Maamorei Chazal that says, just like the soul fills the body, God fills existence. What level is the neshama haklolis? That's Malchus of Atzilus. Shu Malchus Atzilus be'elamis. In the worlds, it's called Malchus of Atzilus. So this is exactly quoted at the bottom of page 1469, Ayin Beis. Malchus of Atzilus, shenikra Elikim Chayim, called Elikim Chayim, the living God, which means the God that gives life. Begilui Eir v'Chayis b'toich kol almin, in revealing light and energy within all the worlds. So just like the soul energizes the body, the divine Malchus of Atzilus energizes existence. B'bchinas kamoi koach hapoel benifel mamish. Just like koach hapoel benifel, the power of the producer within the production, within the product. That means it's manifesting within it and relating to it. Shemezem muchach lemer, he says, from this it compels us to say, sheyesh shinui v'gam ispilus. Because once you say koach hapoel benifel, and there's it's manifesting within, we're talking about the lower level where the soul manifests within the body, you have to say there's some shinui and ispilus, some change and some effect, some impact. And he brings, this is again, in Ayin Beis, he literally quotes all of this. Mochtuli kemachat bebasar hachai. So if you may recall that we discussed this back when we learned it in Ayin Beis, that mochtuli kemachat bebasar hachai, that he gives an example that the Eibishter feels, the Shechina feels our pain like you're sticking a needle, like you're sticking a sharp needle within the flesh of an animal. The animal feels it. So he's having that. There's a Gemara in Brachas that talks about that. Again, the Mittler Rebbe Rashab quotes it right here, which means that our sins below have an impact directly on godliness. Ukiyadua pibgamim like it's known about the pagomim, the wounds that are created through the avinus, through sins below. So lamaila, it creates a wound. Be'evarim the shechina, in the so-called limbs of the shechina. So what do you see from that? That means an impact. That our work impacts, our behavior impacts above. Like the nefesh that manifests within the body, and we said that the experience of the body affect the nefesh that manifests within the body. Just 1 second. I want to just see something in Ayin Beis. Okay. This is called Mamal Kalam because this is how the divine manifests within existence. Hashem, Ozne Hashem, like when we say the eyes of God, the ears of God, what is it referring to? Shehein HaMalochim, these are the angels, Shenikroim Evarim de Shechina. Evarim de Shechina. These are called the limbs of the Shechina, of the divine presence. Obviously not physical limbs, but it means it manifests in a very tangible way. This is referring to the divine faculties, the divine powers, to draw down the flow from one world to the next. Next page, 377. These are the outer containers that draw that energy downward. So all this tells us that there is a dimension of the Elikus that does interact and therefore is impacted by existence. Now, you may recall he said earlier that it does not get impacted. That's what he's saying. There's two levels. There's the lower level where it gets impacted, the higher level we spoke earlier where it doesn't get impacted. It remains like oir. 1 second. Okay. Aber mesitri de Shechina Omar. 1 minute. Now, there's a higher level which is called Ava Mesitri de Shechina Omar Kiloide Isam Kol Tmuna the Adam. Here, on the side of the Shechina, meaning not the Shechina Malchus that manifests within Biy'a, but the Shechina itself, here you say, Loide Isam Kol Tmuna the Adam. There you cannot apply any type of imagery or likeness, human likeness. Why? This is not Malchus Atzilus that enters into Biy'a, but this is Malchus of Atzilus as it's before it enters into Biy'a. And there you cannot apply any of the limbs. You can't talk about limbs that are affected by the low, by the experiences below. Like we spoke earlier, that there's the part of the soul that enters into the body, and there's the part of the soul that remains apart from it. As it's known, that also that that light, that revelation of light or energy, that becomes a source for the sustenance, for the vitality of the worlds, that still remains a higher level, like his galus asmis nefesh, that is becoming the source for the ruchni shebegashmis, which we called the dam before. Shalzeh omar im tzodakta matitan lei, v'loy niskanu aliles, v'loy niskanu be'echot. One second, before we go there, okay. On this level, we say im tzodakta matitan lei. If you are righteous and you do kind, what are you adding to him? He's removed from you. So that's the higher level. Let me just see how he says it in Ayin Beis. Just give me a second. Yeah. Okay, let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. The point is that he's now introduced that there's two levels. One that is impacted and one that's not impacted.
Rabbi Jacobson, back in Ayin Beis, when we were talking about godliness, it said that the only change, the highest level that we could affect from below was the Malchut of Atzilut. How does that parallel to this discussion that we're talking when it comes to the soul and the body? Or the soul, you remember, like it said that the only effect that we have, it goes all the way.
He's saying the same thing here. He's saying the same thing here. He's saying that there's the neshama klolis of Malchus Atzilus that gives life to existence, and that is affected. Sheyesh shinu v'gam ispaus, saying exactly the same thing. The effect is in Malchus as it relates to Biy'a. Then there's Malchus as it relates to Atzilus, and that's removed and higher. That's exactly what he just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when the soul leaves the body, it rejoins that level. Is that the Yehuda Ilah and Yehuda Tata, maybe?
Well, I don't want to jump to Yehuda Ilah, Yehuda Tata. He didn't mention it yet, so let's not go there yet. The only thing I could say is that when the soul leaves the body, so obviously it's not affected by the body any longer, but it's still affected by whatever happened in its lifetime. That's why he said. That's why a neshama would have to go through purgatory or Gehenna or Gan Eden, because what happened with the neshama when it related to the body affected the soul, and that soul, it either empowered it to be able to study Torah in Gan Eden, or it may have somewhat contaminated it, and that would have to be cleansed.
And then after that happens, it will rejoin that higher level of its soul. Is that what you think goes on?
Or even furthermore, like we learned earlier, the transformation of the animal soul actually will propel the divine soul even to higher levels.
Okay.
So it's not just rejoining, it could even go higher.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah. But he's not finished the topic. So let's see here. I'm just making sure I want to keep things balanced. I want to look at how it is in Ayin Beis. Ayin Beis right now goes to much more detail about all this. But let's learn it. Let's learn it in inside Mitler Rebbe, then we'll go back to the Ayin Beis. I'm just looking out of curiosity to see the parallel. Yeah. Any other questions? See, based on this, what we learn now, you could argue, you can make the case that what he brought earlier about what the philosophers say, And what the Mukabalim Rishonim, we called it, the early Kabbalists say, where they talk that it's like a shefa, yesh miyesh. So we know it's not yesh miyesh, but the idea that there is a change, according to what we're learning now, the level of the divine that relates to existence is saying clearly there is an effect. It's only the higher levels where there's no effect. I just wanted to underscore that. We'll soon see how that plays itself out, but I just wanted to emphasize that. Okay. Now it continues.
Everybody hear this correctly, or is it my
Excuse-
computer? I don't hear what it says.
Can't hear you. What?
Everybody hears normal. I'm not getting any, everything's breaking up, but it's probably my.
It's you. It's you.
It seems like it's your end. Okay. Let's continue reading. Here's where the ayin bays goes into further explanation on this topic. And the Mittler Rebbe, they digress somewhat, even though the topic is the same. But it's interesting that the Rebbe Rashab does not quote the next section. Want to see something? He quotes it later. I don't think so. No. Okay. So let's continue reading in Mittler Rebbe here. Now he says like this. Which means it has no impact, because we're talking about a higher level of the divine that's not impact. Now he says, Velu Niskanu. So the reason I'm pausing is because I remember that he brought this somewhere in Ayin Beis, the Veloi with a Vav and the Loi with an Aleph. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I see now where. I understand. Okay. So let's start with this. The Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, in his way, and I want to make sure it's clear because the transition here can be a little confusing, is now going to bring another verse. So verse we learned about Das Elyon and Das Tachten. The expression of the verse in Shmuel Aleph goes like this, that the Eibishter is Keil Deus Hashem. Deus Loshen Rabim, 2. That God is the God, the knowing God. But he doesn't say Deus Hashem, it says Deus. So Chassidus explains that's referring to two forms of knowing existence. One is Das Tachten, that's knowing existence, so to speak, through the lens of existence. And one is Das Elyon, knowing existence like a bird's eye view from the top. And then the pasuk continues and says, Velu, or Loi Niskanu, Aliles. All plots, Aliles, like all the interactions, Aliles means all the happenings of this world are to God, meaning he's aware of it. He runs the whole show, essentially. That's what he says. Now, the word velo, niskano lilis, it's written with a vav, but it's pronounced with a loy, with an aleph. So with a vav means to him. With an aleph means no, veloy. And it's not applied to him. It's not. So he's going to explain that these two ways of the loy, niskano lilis, is God relating to existence or he does not relate to existence, meaning he's beyond existence. So this is what the Mittler Rebbe is now going to address. In Ayin Beis, he brings it, but a little later and more context. But now he's going to say like this. So he says, "Le'niskanu v'loi," with aleph. Just like we also say in other places, it says loy tsar, v'chein loy, tsar loy. So tsar loy, that tsar loy would mean that it's painful to him, that he feels anguish, he feels distress, or loy with an aleph, that there's no tsar. Same idea. Does he get impacted by it or does he not get impacted by it? And finally, one more place, v'chein v'lo yanachnu. There's another pasuk that says lo yanachnu, and in the footnote they bring, talking about Shmuel, Yeshaya, and Tehillim. So again, with a loy, with a vav, ukahai gavna. In other words, you find several places in the Torah that talks about veloy would mean to him that he does get impacted by it, or veloy, he does not get impacted by it. So he says that all this is referring to like we said before, that the core soul, not the soul that manifests within the blood, within the body, but the core soul is not affected by the experiences of the body. Now, so you see here both dimensions. Where it's affected in the lower level, and it's a higher level that's not affected. Zehu chai ha'elamim. This is the meaning when we say chai ha'elamim. The one who gives life, or the life of the worlds, of existence, of the elamim. Which means moker l'moker chaim de mamala. Chai elami is the source of life, the source to the source of life of mamala kalam, of the life within existence. In other words, it's divine energy that is commensurate with, like we see, the words, where the divine energy is channeling into mamala, into the details of existence, like the soul that is directly impacting and entering, like he said before, Oznei Hashem, Einei Hashem, that the soul's energy and faculties are manifesting within the soul, within the body structure. Shenikra, this is called Koach HaPoel Benifel. That's not a creation from a distance. The Koach HaPoel, the power of the producer, Benifel, is manifest and infused within the product. V'im kol zeh omar chai v'loi b'chayim. And nevertheless, we say chai elamim v'loi b'chayim. The Ritzein v'leima, what does he mean by that? The Ritzein afilu b'chayim el yenim shemachayis kol eilmis hu muslim b'chayim ela v'tam hanal. That on the other hand, he remains not chayim as an active engaged force while he's manifesting within. And there is, like he says, some type of impact. He fundamentally remains removed. He negates and defies that type of relationship. Now, is he saying that it's not like the neshama in the body? Or is he saying it's like the higher level of the neshama? We'll get to that. But point being is that he wants to keep maintaining that even if God does manifest and relate to existence, fundamentally he remains removed from it. Like we said before, that it's infinitely distant between the ruchnis of the gashmis, the blood, gam legashmis sheberuchnis, not just to the core soul, but even to the soul as it relates to gashmis, the gashmis within the ruchnis. He gives an example for it, like there's there's infinite distance. L'koach ruchni, the smicha, to the ethereal power of making something grow, hamalubeshes be'esev upri eitz. So we know that in grass, esav is grass, a blade of grass, or grass in general, upri eitz, or the fruit of a tree, we know they have a power to grow. So there's a power invested in them that makes them grow. Compare that to the power that originates that power to grow. Remember, on its own, it all comes down to something is giving it that power. So he says, comparing to legabe koach haruchim sa'atzmis de koach etzemeach, to the very core that God invested and said, I am giving earth the power to give to vegetation, for things to grow. Compare that to the individual power of growth within a particular grass or fruit. It's enarech shenimshach mimenu koach la'atzmiach. So the koach, in other words, like the energy that goes into the blood, damu nefesh, the ruchni shebegashmis, is shalei berach to the gashmi sheberuchni. It's the same thing. The power that lies in making things grow is distant and removed from the power from where that gives it the power to make things grow. Etzem koach etzemeach. So there's a general power that God invested to give things to grow, like a neshama that has the power to give life to a body. And then there's that power itself manifests within the details of the body. And that's where there's the blood that travels to each part of the body. That's the interface. So the same thing in koach etzemeach. There's the general power to allow earth to make things grow. Then there's the specific power to each particular vegetation, whether it's grass, whether it's fruits, whether it's other forms of vegetation. And he goes back, ukigili hatanua be'etzem achai, Toram shepel pula v'tanua gashmis. Okay, so you see an animal, that's a machai, or a human being for that matter, something that's alive. You see it has the power to move. The very life itself is movement. The body is alive, can move. But it's not a specific movement. Before it actually makes a particular move, let's say it walks, or stretches out its arm, or any other specific movement, there's the general movement that the soul has embodied. The very fact that this creature is alive has given it the power to move. But that power to move is still a closed power, like the soul before it manifests within the details of the body. So that is, again, the comparison he's giving between these two levels of divine energy that manifests within existence, but fundamentally remains above and removed from it. Shebachol dimyenas ke'ela. All these examples that I just gave, yuchel lahavim b'chlal, we can in general understand eichus hahevdel, the quality of the difference between the divine energy of mamala kalam that manifests within existence, that comes like a separate power, because it like separates from, doesn't mean physically separates, but it means it's separating from the general divine power. It's becoming a specific energy focused and directed toward the details of creation. That it becomes separate to the point that you can say that there's some type of erech and shinui, some type of commensurate and change between the energy of mamala kalamin with the thing it's creating, like we spoke before about ilav ol, cause and effect. So there's a difference between that koach nivdal that enters within each detail of existence, ubein atzmis hamaitzel mamish, and the very core of the emanator. Av bigili er v'ziv shalei. Not just the core entity there, but even his light and energy his light and reflection that he gives off, shem b'chinas esis shmei yizbarach, which are the letters of God's name. Who esis is the shem ma belvad. So it's esis, it's not coming to kelim yet. These are the esis of shem ma. of the Odom, of the Nefesh of the Kis, Shekodesh removed who that's holy and removed, Be'erech Gam Mokar Achayis, the Elimus, relatively also from the energy as it manifests as a source to existence. Kameshakosov K'imcha Mokar Chayim, with you is Mokar Achayim, Mokar Chayim, Imcha, means everything is Tofel, is secondary to Mokar Chayim, to the source of life. V'alov Omer Ani Havaya Lo Shenisi. And at this higher level, we say Hashem does not change. Va'atahu, like you said before, Atahu. You are this one before you created the world and the same Ata after you created. No change. Va'afal Pisha Omer Va'at. Okay, let me stop for a moment. Let me stop. So he's again explaining here, elaborating on these two levels, the divine as it manifests within existence and the divine that remains fundamentally removed. Again, let me stop for any questions.
Rabbi, does this goes back to Ayin Base with the power of sight? Remember when, right? Is that an analogy?
It relates to that, yes. The power of sight, which is really infinite, and then there's the power of sight as it manifests in the eye, and it gets its finite parameters. It cannot see in the night, can only see that far. That would be connected, yes. One is the etzem koach hariyah and the etzem hanefesh, like he says, higher, and one is as it manifests within the containers, and therefore is limited. So that's a good point, yeah.
Thank you.
Ultimately, we're going to learn that the goal is to connect to the higher, but initially it does begin at these two levels. Okay, va'afal pisha amar va'ata machayas kulam, and even though it says va'ata machayas kulam, that you create everything, which means you are engaged in creating every detail. Shachay is gam kein ein b'shinui, and this energy also has no change. Va'afal pishu bo b'bchinas kiru ve'erech, and even though it manifests in a close way, it relates to existence. Like I said, Yehi Oyer, that energy is manifesting in each detail of existence, so it relates. Relatively relatable and commensurate. And like the shape to a raw piece of matter. So when you take, let's say, a raw piece of clay and you shape it, that shape is in the clay. It's not removed from. So Kitsur Lechem is like the nefesh to the guf. So here too, the Atam Achayas Kulam, the divine energy, is the inner force, the life force, the soul to the body that it is sustaining or creating. Kitsur Lechem be'elamis, at shemispol ba, to the point that it's affected by it and within it. B'kol mokim ein arech lecha, afilu be'elam hazeh. Nevertheless, and again, here he seems to be distinguishing that Hashem is not like the nefesh. In other words, the idea that we say keeps going back and forth, and it's confusing me, to be very honest. I want to go back to Ayin Beis, because there it was clearer. Because on one hand, he began by saying that even the divine manifest in existence also not affected by it. But then, once he brought the nefesh, he said there's a level of the soul that is affected, and there's a level of the Shekhinah that's also affected. And now he goes back and says that even the level of the divine that manifests in existence, he says, that even as it is in Elam Hazeh, it still remains ein arech, infinitely apart. Shehu hey, that's the hey, when you say dehi baram. So he baram has a hey in the beginning. He baram, behei mitzois hapeh. The hey is referring to the 5 gutturals, or the 5 intonations of the mouth, which we know is the teeth, the palate, the lips, the throat, and the tongue, which create the different shapes of letters. So therefore you see clearly it's connected to shapes and forms, to particular sounds. The Hamed says, tzirufim, the Asius, the Yud Maimoris, the Asar Maimoris, in the Tzirufia Asius. in the different permutations and combinations of the letters of the 10 Maamores, the 10 statements that God uses to create existence. So, Elo, Kamosha Nimshul B'Moshel, Chayes HaNefesh B'Guf. But like we spoke earlier about the moshel of the energy and the vitality of the soul in the body, what do we say? Shemispol Eles Mamish Canal. That on that level, the soul is affected, mamish, it's mamish affected by of the body's experiences. Kei Nefesh Alekis, so too the divine soul. Bechinas Nivra Bal Gvul Mechudesh Ma'ayin Liyesh Mamish is manifest in the form of a nivra, a creation, finite one. Umechudesh ma'ayin liyesh. It too is created ma'ayin liyesh. Mamish, meaning there's an element of yesh in the nefesh alikis. V'yesh erech v'yishtavis al kaponim, and it has some form of commensurate, some form of commonality, and some equanimity, some type of something in common. La covers the guf. That covers the guf, to the composite, to the makeup of the body. That covers the guf ima nefesh. Let me correct that. Of the covers the guf ima nefesh, of the makeup of the body as it joins the soul. Like all ruchnius shebegashmius, like we spoke before about the blood, even in semeach, we said before the koach had semeach. So there's the plant, the grass, the fruit on its own, that's gashmis shebegashmis. The ruchnis shebegashmis is the power within it to grow. The gashmis sheberuchnis is the general power of the nefesh and its root to give it that power to grow. And then there's the ruchnis sheberuchnis, the etzem hanefesh. So, but we do see that it does come down to a level that is that connects to, that covers gufim hanefesh, as it is with all ruchnis shebegashmis. So he's saying the same thing with the nefesh alikis and nefesh abamis. I know it's very short. He just says it one half a line, but he clearly is saying that there's a dimension that does relate to and therefore is impacted. But at the same time, he says, and it still retains an element that's removed from it all. So I'm not claiming I have it fully figured out, but I'm just learning inside with you. Let's see where he goes with this. As I said, in Ayin Beis, it was a lot clearer because he concluded the Mittler Rebbe, like I've pointed out, is a free-flowing chassidus. The Tzemach Tzedek once said about the Mittler Rebbe that if you would cut him, not blood would flow, but chassidus would flow. That's the Mittler Rebbe. It's just a free flow of chassidus. So it sometimes can be very confusing because he goes from one idea, then to the other side, and then again to this side, and it's hard to make heads and tails. Where is he up to now? Is he talking about that it does affect it or it does not affect? So let's just go for the ride together. We're learning it together. I'm pointing out this. To me, it's unclear yet where the conclusion is, but clearly there's two sides to the story. As I said, we'll get that clarity, and need be, we'll also go back to Ayin Beis and see how he ultimately explains it there. So here he's been going back and forth by saying that it is removed, remains removed, but then there's a dimension like with the moshel of the nefesh that does connect. Like he says now, Koach hapoel benifel mashen guf nefesh kumei kol mashenkin lamayla. So here he seems to be saying that's in the nefesh and the guf. Lamayla is not that way. Mashenkin lamayla koach eliki muvdul be'erech mebriya bal gvul ave p'chinas koach hanivdul me'elakus.
Let's see.
So now, by contrast, he's saying that Lamaila, the Koach Eliki, meaning the power, the divine faculty, is moved is relatively removed mebriya bal gvul, from the finite creation. Also from the Koach hanivdal, even from the Koach hanivdal, the lower Koach, which is the Koach hapoel, which is the power of the producer within the product. Shenivdal min hapoel, that's separate from the product. Uke'esius hadibur sheyetzim lechutz. They are like the words of speech that exit the person. When we speak, it gets separate from us. You can hear my words. It's like another exits my inner being. Thought remains something that is connected within us, but speech goes outward. Nevertheless, it remains a koach halaki. It's God speaking. And it doesn't have any change. So this last piece, as I said, seems to be back and forth, and it's not clear to me. First, he began saying there is change. There is no change. Then he said there is change on that level. Then he said that change is only in the nefesh. Mashenkin Lamaila, there is no change. So which one is it? That remains not 100% clear to me. I understand there are many levels, but it's not clear. Is he comparing a nefesh and a guf to Elikus Lamaila? Like he said, Kamoy Kain Yuval Lamaila ben Neshama Klolis, Kach Yuval in the previous page? Or is he distinguishing between them? I'm leaning towards saying that there's something in common between them and there's also something they're not in common. That's what it sounds like to me. But I'm being honest, as we read it, he goes back and forth, back and forth. This is part of the Mittler Rebbe's approach to things. As I said, we will get clarity. So, but right now, he's middle of this back and forth, back and forth. So I would rather wait till he finishes and then we can see. So I will let me just finish two more lines to the end of the paragraph. The kachaymer atohu, and that's what it means. Atu mishanivreil mishalenivreil. The ata zekoi ba'esis used Maamorei. Ata is referring Aleph Tov Hey. Ata is the letters of the 10 statements of creation. Shebekolusim chav beis esis v'amshachas. In general, it refers to 22 letters, and each letter is asa beiket. Each letter is a channel. So it's 22 channels. That's specific details that relate to existence. That is the level of Yichud Tata, the Yichud of the divine within existence, the Malchus of Malchus. Also in the Asis of Dibur, well, I would say Dibur and Maisa actually. I don't think it's Machshava. I think he means Dibur and Maisa. Not positive, but that's what it sounds like to me. Dibur and Maisa. I don't think it's Dibur and Midas. It's Dibur and Maisa most likely. I'm looking below. Meaning, even as the letters come down, they remain divine, and that's Yichud Tata. So the question is, are they impacted? Is there shinui or there's no shinui on that level? In a few lines, it seems, on some places here, it seems there is a change. Some places, it sounds like there is no change. And that, I think, we're going to have to read it again a few times until I get it clearly. I want to also go back to Ayin Beis to see how he explains it. But this whole section that we just read, the Rebbe Rashab does not quote. He stops at the top of the page. Most of this page is Mittler Rebbe's material that the Rebbe Rashab does not quote, and perhaps for this reason, because he wants to create an order here. And when you read this, the back and forth, back and forth. But I'll stop here because he continues, the next page continues this discussion. And I think we're going to have to read a little more until we really get to the bottom of it. Now he's also introduced the word Yichud Tata for the first time. He didn't mention it till now. I mentioned it briefly, but now he's mentioning it as Mamala Kalam, the divine within existence, like the nefesh that is affected by the guf. So, as I said, if you're a little confused, welcome. I'm also, and we'll get there. But I'm going to stop here. If your question is about what I'm asking, I'm already asking the question. But if anybody wants to weigh in, maybe you have more clarity than I do, by all means. And maybe you have other questions. So let's stop here and tell me what you want, if anybody wants to comment on anything.
Rabbi Jacobson, it's actually interesting that the Mittler Rebbe is bringing the example, the mashal of the sameach. The thing is, if you look at a fruit tree, we're told, I mean, obviously, when it comes to the sovev and mamala, the mamala will be the fruit, meaning that we're able to affect it by saying a bracha, we're able to elevate it. But then on the current condition, that's all we could do. But then when Mashiach comes, it says that even the bark of the tree is going to taste like a fruit itself. So that means that now we're tapping into the sovev, in the level that we are able to change things. Just like the eye, it parallels the example of the eye also. That once within current conditions, that's maybe the idea is that with the current condition, that may be the rooftop as to where we could affect. But Latid La'avo means that's when we can able to affect even more than that.
I have no comment. I'm not that far ahead as in my thinking yet. I'm just trying to understand what he's saying here, so I can't really comment on that.
The level,
yeah.
level here, where the Rebbe says, "V'kachom atahu, datuzeh kaila osios the aseret memoros." The ata here, therefore, is not. Sometimes it's referred to as ata, it's atzmus, right? That's not a name; it's you yourself, like the story with the tzemach tzedek. But is this ata? What level is this ata here?
He says mamalakom. He says va'ata machayes kulam.
Yeah. Okay.
He's talking about the chayes ata, referring to aleph taf hey, the letters mamalakom, the divine as it manifests within existence. That's what it sounds like to me.
Don't we normally speak of ata as a much higher level?
There is no normally. There's no such thing as normally. Every place uses it as it sees fit. Ato could mean right here. It's mamalaklam. He's not talking about ato. What you're referring to, ata resel adas atzmus.
Yes.
Not at all what he means here. Ato is used in many different contexts.
Okay. So this is mamale, not even sova. It's not even the koach of Biy'a. It's, so to speak. It's the actual.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me.
Okay.
I think at the end of the day, both levels are there. There's the chayes alaki that relates to existence, where there is some type of effect. But then when you contemplate deeper on it, you realize that there's also no effect. I think ultimately that's what the Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe wants to say. But I don't want to conclude that until we really read it inside all the way. And then I also want to read it in the, as I said, Ayin Beis. You need to really see an Ayin Beis. An Ayin Beis, the Machtu, the Machat. Yeah, that's very clear. There's a Shinim Mitzad the Machat, the Avenus. Yeah. Are there any other comments or questions anybody wants to make?
Just a comment. The Rebbe here talks about.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Rebbe speaks here about Sameach, and you know how Dam is, is a connection of the highest throughout Mamale and so on. That the Adam is the Adam, Aleph Badam is the Aluf and Dam. But plants, Chayas have blood. Medaber has blood, but plants don't have blood. They have a totally different kind of system. They don't have a circulatory system. They use photosynthesis, which to transport it, which is very interesting. It's a different kind of way God is relating to Sameach than he does with even Medaber and.
It's a very good point, but the photosynthesis can be compared to Ruchni Shebegashmias too. Because let's say a piece of metal doesn't have photosynthesis.
Right.
So So in other words, what by us is blood, that is by then the photosynthesis that happens through I think it's even called the capillaries of the leaves.
Yeah.
They do
Right.
have something there that, I don't think it's capillary. There's some name for it that photosynthesis requires certain makeup in vegetation, right?
Right.
There's a name for it. I remember it was in chemistry. We learned it. What gives it the green color? What is it called? Chlorophyll? Chlorophyll?
Yeah.
Chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll, right. That is, I think, like the equivalent of blood. Obviously, it's not blood, and it's on a lower level, but good point you're making. But you see there, too, that the Eibishter made it, it doesn't just give it life, it's going through the photosynthesis process. But continue. I didn't want to cut you off, but that,
No.
but
It just seems like an interesting.
We lost
Yeah.
you, Eliezer.
he went on mute. Actually, I just found in Ayin Bays where he resolves this issue at the bottom of 1470. I didn't notice it before. I think it's very vital to this piece we're learning. Okay, I'll explain it tomorrow. Anyway, in a Kedimian. The Nefesh Lekis, the Nefesh Abamis is comparing to the Neshama Nefesh, not the Lekus. That's the key. Okay.
We're in the bottom of 270.
Right at the
Are you
bottom, the last 10 lines.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very good. That explains, he quotes the Mittler Rebbe here and explains it. Good. I feel a little, some relief here.
And also, I thought it was interesting when he says that Nefesh Elokis is a nivra. It's a nivra. It's not a chelik elokama mamash. So that was an interesting.
That's what the Mittler Rebbe, that's what the Rebbe Rashab explains at the bottom of 1470, actually. Yeah, wow, okay. Good. Well, this is going to be interesting. We'll finish learning the Mittler Rebbe. Then I'd like to go back to the Ayin Beis on this piece at least. And I think we'll be able to see how it all comes. It's going to be clear at the end. It's not clear yet, but it's going to be clear.
For me.
I assure you that. That I assure you of that. Very good. Yeah. Okay. Any other? So let's stop here. We're stopping where we're stopping here. The bottom of page 377, end of the paragraph.